Hi, I'm Danielle Davies, and you're listening to Roar, a show that amplifies the voices of women breaking barriers, leading change, and making real impact. Keep listening for bold ideas and stories that inspire you to find your voice and make some noise. Hi, everybody. This is Danielle Davies, the host of Roar. Today's guest is someone who's spent her entire career helping women reconnect to themselves, mind, body, and spirit. From her early work in women's studies, counseling, and social advocacy, to her current role as a Vedic astrologer, intuitive tarot reader, transformational coach, and meditation teacher, Sharon Kenney Rudy, also known as the Tiger Priestess, has dedicated her life to guiding women through what she calls the alchemy of midlife. Her group programs like Return to Radiance and Reclaim Your Magic help women move from overwhelm to ease, from burnout to aliveness, blending ancient wisdom, archetypal psychology, and real-world habits to create lasting transformation. Sharon's work is about practical magic, taking the mystical and bringing it into everyday life so that women can remember who they are and dare to live like they mean it. Thanks for coming, Sharon.
It is so wonderful to be here, Danielle. Thank you so much.
I'm very excited. And everybody, Sharon and I met, was it just this summer? I feel like we've known each other for 6 years now, but I think it really was just this summer.
It was the springtime.
Okay.
And spring break with my kids in Ocean City.
Yes. And instantly she said something where I was like, I need to know this woman. And also she needs to be on my podcast. So she is generously gifting us with her time right now. And I am very excited that you're here. So thank you. I'm just going to jump right in because I have a lot of questions for you, but let's just start with this. You've said that midlife is deeply transformational and it's a time that's rich with possibility, but so many women experience it as exhaustion or disconnection. I'm looking at myself here. What do you think gets in the way of that transformation or that kind of transformational feeling, transformative feeling?
Oh, I really love this question to begin because I think quite often we have this, kind of moment, and in talking with so many women in midlife, this sort of moment of WTF, like, is this all there is? Whether, for women who have children, I mean, sort of in the kind of minutia of like the day-to-day, the grind, the this, right? For women who have, even really high-powered careers, who've been kind of go, 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 do for a very long time. Women who do both of those things, women who are caretakers, right? All this sort of huge spectrum. And then there's this moment, and it's interesting too, in Vedic astrology, there is this particular moment that I affectionately call the midlife crisis of Vedic astrology. But when we're in our late 40s, we're suddenly that which we've kind of always wanted, that we've always yearned after, suddenly it doesn't have that same grip on our consciousness. And it can be this time of really this even deep confusion. And I think without, what has that, the power and the potency for transformation, I think one of the missing pieces here in this sort of like WTF moment of like, all right, well, what now is oftentimes that the sort of ennui of modern life. Where
I was going to ask you about that.
Right?
Okay.
This is where we're kind of like, whether it's like being like checked out on devices or just sort of, again, like more on the surface level of life, perhaps even like a disconnect from, it's interesting. I even feel like in friendships, sometimes it's like we can, it's sort of like floating on the surface level and this aspect of community that becomes the missing piece in transformation. So that, in bringing women together, in particular in community, which there's a lot of times when women come into my coaching programs, there sometimes is this little bit of like suspect nature of like, how can I be myself around like these other, I don't even know these other women. I don't know. And then sort of in coming in and beginning to make these really wonderful, amazing transformations in their own body mind, there's this kind of like protective layer that begins to crack open in a sense. And they begin to relax and they begin to connect with women from other paths that look different from them that, but realizing there's this really common thread of, I would actually say, awakening, this sort of like dark night of the soul moment or moments that happen. And then in that kind of cracking open and the willingness to say yes, the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to kind of just wholeheartedly say like, oh gosh, like even like, I don't even know, but I know something needs to shift. Like, let's do this. And then taking them, on this transformative journey, whether it's sometimes women have been in my collectives for years that are like, I don't want to leave. We're just going to hang out for years. Sometimes like the current container I have, Reclaim Your Magic, it's a 6-month container that's ending in about a month. Even yesterday on our call, one of the women was like, wait a minute, but what's next? Like, this can't, like, I just said, I get so excited when I come on the call. And then, I miss you all already once it ends. And so it's this really interesting, I even think midlife is, yes, this kind of this moment of, isn't there more than this? What else is there? But even the woman I'm talking about from yesterday, she'll be 70 actually. So it's also, I look at it very much of like this sort of second half of life that's really rich with potency and possibility. And so.
Well, I have a question. So before we get into what you do with the women and how this works, talk to me about, or do you find, it's really hard to say, right? We're only alive in our own lifetime. So it's like, it's not like I can be like, well, what do you think it was like 100 years ago? But in terms of like being checked out on devices and being very surfacey, and I'm really just like succinctly summing up what you beautifully said. But in terms of those things, do you find that, I feel like a lot of times I'm equal parts grateful for our modern inconveniences. Like I'm very glad that I can put clothes in a wash machine and I don't have to stand there and I don't have to scrub them. But the fact that we've got all these conveniences to make life easier has actually made life faster in a way where we don't really have time to connect. Like I feel like for a really long time when my kids were babies until, even fairly recently, you're so on the go or whether it's your career, whatever it is, you're so on the go. You don't really have that time for deeper conversations or deeper relationships. And I just was curious, and I love how you said that modern ennui. Is that how we say ennui? I just was curious what you think of that and how that affects that internal life of ours.
Mm-hmm. I love this. So, one thing that I was just actually writing a note because I was like, I don't want to lose track of this thought. Especially since so much of my life I've been studying yoga. And of course, yoga in the West, we think of as like yoga asana, like, oh, the poses we do, I take the class down at the Y. And like, the yoga asana is a very tiny, tiny, like delightful little piece of what yoga is. But, the ancient yogis would talk about being as kala grasa in Sanskrit, time swallowers. Right. So this idea, I know, this really interesting idea that time is this construct. And like through the practices of yoga, and a huge part of what I teach in terms of women in Ayurveda, which is kind of the Vedic health branch, the Ayurveda is really ancient, the system of healing in India. And so, and a very essential part of what yoga really is. And so this idea of like being a time swallower is that through the different practices that we do, and I'm talking like real simple stuff, like yesterday in the Reclaim Your Magic call, we were talking about doing an embodiment practice of getting up and getting your eyes in the sun first thing in the morning, right? Why? Well, one part, right, setting one's circadian rhythm. So being, yes, so sort of, again, checked out on devices, although, I'm looking at my phone over there. It's like, yeah, I also love this, modern connection, and also recognizing like it's quite addictive and it does kind of become this time suck, right? So, sorry, pause, rewind.
No, this is
back
great.
Okay, right? Being a time swallower, right? Okay, by getting up, getting eyes in the sun, right? Setting your circadian rhythm. Also, just this whole sort of, worship of Surya, of the sun in the sky, this archetypal presence that is just giving ceaselessly, wanting nothing in return. And that taps us into this real like cosmic father energy that's whether, depending how we were parented, or not to throw our parents under the bus because they're our first gurus, as I always like to say, but it is this aspect of giving unconditional love and warmth to ourselves simply by the fact of existing, right? So it's like, okay, I'm getting my eyes in the sun. I'm having this moment of communication with the cosmic father in the sky, how that offers myself saying, I am worth it to stand out in the sun, maybe with my morning cup of coffee or my hot water, whatever I'm enjoying, and just being there and basking in that, having all these very tangible benefits for health, for also setting circadian rhythms so we sleep better at night, because we know in menopause, like, oh, perimenopause, what begins to happen? I can't sleep, right? So women will come to me with these very sort of practical, real problems. And by, part of it is, yes, the grandmother wisdom of Ayurveda. Yeah, get your eyes in the sun in the morning, right? First thing in the morning, like doing particular things. We become time swallowers. So rather than having this day where we sort of pick up our phones first thing and are scrolling, and, every single scroll needs to be digested. The idea in Ayurveda, everything needs to be digested. Every experience, our food, our emotions, right? So rather than being like, let me pick this up, which it's like, okay, let me get my eyes in the sun. Let me be out here for 5 minutes with myself, right? Let me commune with this cosmic father energy of Surya, of the sun. And then it sets up, even like that very simple 5-minute thing that we can do can set up this very different day that suddenly it's like, oh, I've become a time swallower. Because, right, rather than being like, how often do I hear from women? I get up in the morning. I've got to make the lunches. I've got to do this. I hit snooze 5 times. Right, all of this sort of frantic energy that gets cultivated in the morning. It's like, oh, actually, let me become a time swallower. And just doing that, one example of a pretty simple practice one can do that really sets a different tone for the day. I don't know
Sharon,
if I answered your question.
First of all, I feel like I am going to have you on the phone for 6 hours. Everybody just be warned, be warned. But I have so many questions. I have a comment. It's going to make me forget my question, and I hope not. But it's interesting you say this, because I have like a morning routine that I try to always write in my journal and do a little gratitude journal. It's not like a big thing. It's not a super big time commitment. In fact, over the years, I've gone from 3 pages to 1 of what I'm required to just fill a page of nothing. And it sets the day, right? It sets the tone. And that works great, except for the days that I'm too busy to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Because we do wake up with that sense of urgency so much of the time, which is why I really appreciate the fact, oh, good, I'm leading myself right back to my question, that you're taking something that's like a little esoteric, right? It's not like we're talking about building furniture. We're not, nothing tangible necessarily, but you're bringing practical information to women's lives, not just conceptually, because even I just recently was at my daughter's pediatrician with her, and my daughter's pediatrician is wonderful. And she was like, I want you to start meditating. This is going to really, you don't even know how this is going to change your life. Every day, I want you to do 5 minutes. And we're both like we have time for that. Who has 5 minutes? But if you start out making that a priority, then you build on. It's like that. It's almost like, if you want to put it in, I hate to say this, but like mansplaining Franklin planner, which I love a Franklin planner and I love the Franklin Covey system. They should all know that I should be a spokesperson. But there's a thing like, they tell you to take like a jar and you've got your tasks for the day and you put the big rock in first and then you fit in all the other rocks. Don't try to put the big rock in afterwards, but make that time to yourself the big rock. Like, even if it's small, it's huge. Like, it has a profound effect.
Yes.
So I'm just curious, can you tell me how this actually started for you? Because you actually also have a whole history of working with women in other ways. And, so it's not just, and for lack of better words, and I hope this is not offending you in the slightest bit, but I know it's not because we've actually talked about it, but it's not just woo-woo. And I And I love woo woo, but it's also for people who don't, how it's practical and how your baseline was actually very practical as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Gosh, where it all began. So one of the things I love that I just wanted to start by saying how you're identifying the practical. Like I often talk about this idea of practical magic, because I think one of the places where, yeah, the sort of woo woo that gets, misunderstood, or also how it, actually, let me not go down that road of critiquing other people's woo.
I was just going to say, how it becomes like cheapens. Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Cheapens? Right, okay.
It does, right? So I think, where it all began, well, let's see. I remember funny, so I would say in my last year of college, in my undergraduate years, I had to take a gym requirement. And I was, at that moment in time, I don't know if you know what like a crust punk is. They're like not just like a regular punk, but like I had like really long dreadlocks. I looked like I had like, pins and patches and spikes and boots. And I looked kind of like I hadn't taken a shower in many weeks. Like I was like really just hardcore. Like I listened to music that was like, right. It was like, that was me.
Okay.
So to be told
now
like,
you have to go to
gym class, I was like, no, I left that behind in high school. So I was like, all right, well, and I looked at all the list of requirements, and at the very bottom, right, it was like under volleyball, there was yoga. I was like, huh. I'm like, all right, I'm curious about this. And so, yeah, when was that? 1995? No, 1990. Let's call it the late 90s. So I took my yoga class.
Okay.
And I felt a little corny. I felt a little awkward. And I loved every moment of it. I loved how, as you're identifying, right, your morning writing, which it sounds like you were doing the morning pages, which I love. And then it just goes down to
the artist.
Because the 3 pages, like I always if I tell women to do that, I'm always like, well, you can choose the size of your notebook. So you could do a tiny one and do 3 pages.
Be very small.
Right. So I remember at that time, my teacher, having us keep a journal. And it turned into, although, yes, it was more of like a yoga asana class, like doing more poses, she really had this component of deep self-reflection, which has always been a huge part of myself, and just loving the deeper hidden realm of life, and kind of going, whatever I go into, I go very, very deep. And so in starting in that yoga asana in that way, and then I went to graduate school for women's and gender studies. And at that point, when I was in graduate school, being a very broke graduate student, I was like, well, I can't really afford to take classes at like a yoga studio. And I had BKS Iyengar's, Mr. Iyengar's book, Light on Yoga. And I would just open it up every day. What can I do here? What can I do? And so I kind of started teaching myself. And then in 2003 was when I entered a yoga teacher training program. Okay. And it's sort of like I got very deep into the Shaiva Shakta philosophy, which is, sort of, I'll put that on the side for now, but sort of like a lot about the hidden, the unseen realm, and the way that, as time unfolded and I was very into like, I would say more of like the circus aspect of yoga that was like bending myself in half and putting my feet on my head and all of that sort of stuff, which I always like. I have a lot of, talking about Vedic astrology, I have a lot of Mars in my chart, which is Mars is action, courage, purpose, doing, putting your feet on your head, right? So my Mars expression at that time was really in this sort of like very kind of intense asana that I loved doing. And yet I felt like there's got to be more here. And so in 2009 was when I met my meditation teacher. His name is Paul Muller-Ortega. And I remember he came there was a certified yoga teacher gathering it was Anusara Yoga, is what I practiced at the time. And he came and spent a week with the certified teachers. And I said, oh my God, this man, like when he speaks, it's like honey pouring out of his mouth. Like, I need to know more about this. And then at that moment was when it was like, oh, he's a meditation teacher. And I always thought, but I can't meditate. I can't quiet my mind. I can't. I had all of these misunderstandings about what meditation is, how it works. And what I received from Paul at that time in 2009, I was like on fire. I was like, there's something in my heart that was like, I need to follow this guy. Like this guy, it's like the moment when, and perhaps some of your listeners have had this experience when your heart just recognizes something in a teacher and doesn't even know why you like need to go with that person or after that person, but you do, and you follow that call. Right? It's kind of like, to tie it into the tarot, the very first archetype of the tarot is the Fool. It's sort of like this moment where like there's something inside of you. You just have to say yes to the adventure. You're kind of scared. You're not sure, but it's like the road opener of the tarot. All right, I'm going to say yes to this. So at that moment, I said yes to Paul. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I guess I'm learning how to meditate. And at that moment, I received it was called a heartseed mantra. And the mantra is what pivots one's awareness and brings it to that inner realm, which before when I had tried to meditate, it was like, I'm going to try really hard. I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to focus on my breath. I'm going to, right? I sort of approached it the way I did with like the intense asana of like, I can get my feet to my head. But what's interesting is Nilakanta meditation, which is what he teaches, what I now teach. It's this very effortless process where you close your eyes, you think your mantra. It's really, and I've been doing it for 16 years now. So that moment in 2009, it sort of started this different trajectory for me that yes, so much of it was about meditation and deepening my studies with Paul, but I also started getting called more to this sort of unseen realm of life. And one of the real tangible gifts of my own meditation practice was that my intuition cracked wide open. And then about 2015, 10 years ago, was when I was like, okay, I started learning about the tarot, these extraordinary primordial archetypes that are, I love to see them as these like kind of Russian nesting dolls, that like, at the very, all these archetypes of the tarot that have, and it's not, I always have a box of tarot on my desk, right? It's not, people always think, oh, it's like, this is it's like, pull, what did I get today? And yes, right, here's the devil, right? There's right, something, it's like, okay, it could be this moment of like, what did I get today? You can use, it's a beautiful tool of divination, but there's also this aspect of the tarot that there are these primordial archetypes that tell us about our own experience in the world, that show us, it's sort of like, again, the Russian nesting doll. I love to think of, all of the archetypes. They've always been surrounding us. They've always been protecting us, holding us. They're nothing new. When you learn about these archetypes, it's like, oh, like, okay, yeah, I get that. I understand that because it already lives within you. And then, of course, it being that, I always think of this Russian nesting doll metaphor, you're finding yourself, which is right, that tiny little nugget doll, that little precious one that you find at the very center and you're like, oh, it's so delightful. It's like, oh my gosh, that's none other than you. You've been there all along, right? These archetypes have been there all along. So I started reading tarot at that point. A few years after that was when I got really nerdy about Vedic astrology, about Jyotish, because that's also a branch of yoga. It just all was very kind of natural. And then so, yeah, since 2015, at that point, I sort of started kind of doing a little less yoga asana teaching. I kind of pulled back from my classes in New York City. I was kind of still teaching locally in New Jersey. And then really the last, and then I started slowly retiring from teaching yoga.
Okay. I'm going to go back. So now I have many more questions for you.
Okay.
And the reason, by the way, I had a whole entire prepared thing of questions, and you've actually it's actually like you've actually said exact lines that I had, and I'm like, oh wow, we are very connected right now. But let me back up for a minute. Your studies in grad school were women's studies.
Yeah, women's and gender studies at Rutgers. Yeah.
Okay, so you took this. Basically, everything you've done has been super intertwined. But I'm curious, did you notice? Have you always been focused on using these new things that you've learned over the course of the years, because obviously you've continued your studies, like you said, yoga, the tarot, which I now know I'm pronouncing incorrectly.
You can say it either way.
Okay. All of these studies that really you're continuing, right? It's like continuing ed on your own and with personal and private teachers. But it has come back to that original part, which is the women. So how did you sense that this is going to be the thing that you do? Like, why did you think, first of all, I think it's really helpful what you're doing, and I want to know exactly what it is and how that's happening, but that's next. First, I want to know, what was your draw to be working with women, specifically in midlife? Because you could be doing this type of work with anybody, right? Anybody can benefit from learning more about themselves, their place in the universe, what's inside them, what's outside them, how we react to it, right? So what made you choose working with women?
They feel like it chose me. In a way, I think when I look at, I'm writing little notes to myself as
that's okay. I'm taking tons of
it. Great. I think when I think about why women, even like going back to like why women in gender stuff, like why did I choose to get my master's degree in something that's like, what am I doing with this? And funny enough, like I kind of go back to like being a crust punk, because a lot of that music was like super political in this really awesome way, like in this very awesome, in my opinion, leftist, radical way where, I never forget when I was 15 years old, there's this band, Crass, this band from the UK, and they had this album, Penis Envy, this total feminist. And I remember putting that on when I was 15 years old. I was like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever heard, ever. And I was just like, whoa, right? So this sort of, again, I've always had this very Martian kind of, again, Mars I described as action, courage, purpose, but it's also Mars and Jupiter are very prominent energies in my personal horoscope. And Jupiter is also standing up for what's right. So when Mars and Jupiter get together, which I have Mars and Jupiter in the first house, which is like who you are, how you show up in the world, it gave me this very sort of like, also, I have a bit of a rebellious bent, like a little rebellious bent. It's like, I want to stand up for the underdog here. And of course, like women, because being, a teenage girl growing up in suburban New Jersey, like, like these issues begin to present. And so that led me towards women's and gender studies. And then, yes, being in professions of helping women, being a counselor at an abortion clinic, helping kind of women through that process of terminating pregnancies. I worked as a counselor at a rape crisis center. So that's always been really essential, very important to me in terms of the prevalence of violence against women. And so that was a huge part of what I did. And then in getting my master's degree, I taught women's studies at Rutgers for a little while. And then I was working with people living with HIV and AIDS, which there were a lot of women that I worked with. So it's sort of that was a really important part of my life in my 20s. And then when I started teaching yoga, it's kind of like I never really left that behind, although I was teaching, right, any sort of student, all sorts of students. And so fast forward to when I started working more in, I guess we would call it like the unseen realm of like doing tarot readings and Vedic astrology readings, even a lot of private yoga with women, like a lot would come up about women, their bodies, challenges with embodiment, challenges in the mind, the emotional body. And I found myself sort of almost, although I don't have a counseling degree and I don't claim to be a therapist, I'm not, but I found that a lot of my readings would become this really interesting kind of going very, very deep with women about these issues that we're presenting. And then meanwhile, I have all of these very practical tools that I use in my own life that I sort of started offering women in our sessions. Like, okay, right. I was using the get your eyes in the sun. Yeah. I mean, we could talk about There are all sorts of things. In Ayurveda, there's a whole practice of putting oil on your body. It's called
I read you just posted
right.
about.
Exactly.
Right.
So in Mystical Moon Days, which I have a newsletter that Danielle receives weekly on Mondays on Moon Day,
Yeah.
where I give like a little teaching, a little esoteric nugget of wisdom, my own reflections. And I was writing about Abhyanga this week. So Abhyanga is the practice of putting oil on the body, which I mean, there are tremendous benefits. It's very powerful for sort of actually really dismantling anxiety is one of the really big things of like putting oil on the body. Just
I have to lube myself up.
okay, yeah, we all, and especially right now in autumn when the weather becomes right windy and dry and cold, and we notice our minds start kind of getting a little scattered, a little worried. Like, do we sort of like the autumn leaves spinning in New Jersey right now? We can become a little bit like that. So Ayurveda says, oh, time to have this warm, nourishing practice of putting oil on the body. So went on a little tangent there. Going back to, I would sit with women in sessions and be like, oh, get oil on your body and do this and do that. But what I found lacking in a one-on-one reading is like, okay, we would do all this powerful work. And then like, but there was no accountability and nowhere to follow through of like actually doing it. And then I'd see a woman in 6 months. She's like, well, I know you told me to do all that great stuff, but like, I didn't really do it. Let's do another reading. I'm like, well, we can do another reading. And so kind of born out of my own somewhat frustration, but also wanting to give women these tangible tools that they will actually practice and use and do. That's how my first women's collective, Return to Radiance, was born, which was like, okay, we're going to do this together. Because going back to what we were talking about way earlier is, right, community is the missing piece in transformation. So suddenly when women were with a cohort that they're like, all right, we're kind of all doing this together. I'm hearing about like Kathy's really enjoying that Abhyanga at night. Like maybe I'm going to try it myself too. Or like, oh, interesting. Like, so-and-so is. So it was sort of like this moment of, like, we're doing this together. And through that power of community, then the changes would actually stick. As opposed to a one-on, and I love one-on-one readings. They're beautiful, wonderful, like it's great. But for really lasting transformation, what I find is women need to be in community. And then I think finally, when you had asked like why women in midlife, and I sort of feel like partly like they chose me, but also or it chose me, right? Sort of like being a woman in midlife. Like I just turned 50 in July. So that, it's like these are all the very practical tools that I rely on day in and day out to kind of birth myself through midlife and not lose my mind. And I think like they're great, right? We sort of have lost, even going back to your question earlier about, time and do we have enough time for all this different stuff? It's sort of like, we've kind of lost that primordial rhythm. It's like, I want to keep the device, but it's like we have lost, right? The knowledge of the seasons, like this grandmother wisdom of Ayurveda of like, okay, now that it's like cold and windy and like that's right why I'm wearing my scarf this morning. It's like it's why I'm going to choose like rather than having like a salad later today, I'm going to choose like warm vegetables roasted in ghee because it's like, oh, my body is craving, or like roasted vegetables in my soup. My body and mind really wants warm, moist, grounding food. So learning real simple things like this of like, all right, let me just make a switch from like salad of summer into soup of autumn. Profound effects on the nervous system. And these are all things that we've forgotten.
Quick pause to thank all of you for listening. You may have noticed that Roar sounds a little more polished this season. That's thanks to my producer, who's responsible for making this third season sound as good as it does. If you believe in amplifying women's voices and want to support a teeny tiny creative team trying to do big, meaningful things, you can help at buymeacoffee.com/roarpodcast. Your support truly makes all of this possible. And now let's get back to the show. So first of all, I think it's real. This is an observation. you may want to speak on it, but you don't have to. You have said a few times the unseen world.
Yeah.
You've become interested in the unseen world, but you've also talked about literally like the earth, right? The leaves swirling, the coldness, and it's just interesting because it's really, like you said, like ancient wisdom, right? People used to use their signals from the earth to inform them about whether it's where they're going to be hunting, if they need a fire tonight. I mean, these are things that generations before us were out of necessity learned to do, right? Even just herbal medicine, like it was all out of necessity before there were antibiotics and Advil and things like that were just so easy. My husband recently was like, why don't we make our own pasta? And I was like, because it's so easy. I'm like, because it's actually easier if I just open the box. Yeah. So, you know what I mean? So there, and again, that's the time, right? You're not spending that time. So it's just really interesting how you talk about it like it's unseen. And I understand that part of it, but how it's also so rooted in the earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that. But then also, the more we learn about any subject, if I were having this conversation with a fintech advisor and we were talking about their advice for what women should be buying in terms of stock in midlife, they would be like saying words like NASDAQ, and they would be saying other words that were also not in my vocabulary. But your words and your vocabulary are, distinctly different from somebody who's in the fintech world or, different worlds. You are immersed in it. And so that comes across pretty clearly if somebody meets you and stuff. When women join you, do they have to be aware of these things, or can they come in just as like, I just recently had a girls' night with a bunch of my college friends. Hi, college friends, if you're listening, I love you. So, and it was great. And, we're just dancing around and having fun and catching up and talking about our kids. And no one is saying words like Abhyanga, right? Abhyanga,
yes.
Right? But we could all maybe benefit from it. So
completely.
That's what I was saying. So do women have to know?
No, I'm so happy you're bringing this up. I'm so happy you're bringing this up. I always say there is no prerequisite for any of this, right? It's like when you were talking about like, well, having did you mention the Advil or did I write down the Advil?
I wrote Advil. Yes. No, I said Advil. I said
did you say Advil or was I thinking Advil?
I didn't want to say Tylenol,
right?
No. I just
didn't
want to involve myself.
Let's not go there.
I'll just talk about Advil.
No. Gosh, great.
Sorry.
No, it's perfect, right? I'm thinking in particular about a woman who came to me, right, suffering from like these debilitating migraines, like these headaches that would come. And, it was interesting and really it's like, I don't want to say like, oh, well, I'm not a person to be like, well, just get rid of the Advil. Like, oh, just do that. Right. It's like, okay, no, cool. Like you have the Advil that helps you when you're in that place of like total debilitation. But also let's figure out what's going on here. And even in terms of Ayurveda, it was like, okay, well, we figured out she's not pooping every morning. We're going to talk about poop. That's a huge, right? Digestion is a huge thing in Ayurveda. So it's like, all right, figuring out what needs to happen so that you move your bowels every morning. And guess what? Over time, boom, the headaches that have affected her for the past 15 years, gone, which is, incredible, right? So in that way, it's like, oh my gosh, right? I'm getting like the way that we have the modern, we don't want to get rid of the modern, but we also, right, it's sort of like there are also all of these, this ancient wisdom that has been forgotten, that has gotten lost, right? This realm of the unseen that can help us tremendously in getting better at who we already are, in feeling really good in our bodies, in our minds. And that being said, right, she didn't need to know, oh, well, I'm creating a Vata pacifying diet so that I can, it's like, no, it's like, what do we need to, like, let's we had a whole protocol for her, but it's like, she didn't need to know any Sanskrit words. She just wanted those freaking headaches to go away. And I wanted those headaches to go away for her. So there's no prerequisite at all. And then I think that as women sort of start to come in and realize like, oh, I think, yes, having like some women who come in have a bit of an esoteric bent already of like, but there are also some women who come in who are just these like, like high powered executives that are just, out there in the world and really successful in all these things. And somehow, usually by word of mouth, they found out about me. And then suddenly it's like this whole other realm begins to open up.
And so, go ahead.
No, keep going, Danielle.
Well, I was going to say, and is it at midlife? And I hate that I'm even asking this question, actually, but I do want to know, is it too late? It's not. I want to know why, though. Too late. So, you started your yoga practice in college, right? You were what, 18, 19 years old, maybe 21, maybe. And now you're 50. You've had 29 years. Is it, so you've reaped the benefits?
I didn't even realize that. Yeah, it's been that long.
Sorry. Forget my math. That's as far as my math actually is going to take me. But, is it too late for somebody coming in at 51, 60, 70 to start to implement these things and see results?
Oh my gosh. No, I'm thinking as soon as you started saying that, I'm thinking of a client I have who's 75. And she was in the Return to Radiance collective for a few years. And it was kind of amazing of kind of the dismantling of chronic inflammation in her body. It's funny because the client that I'm thinking of, she definitely started getting like pretty nerdy about all things like, I'm not teaching Vedic astrology formally in these collectives, but it kind of, it enters my vocabulary, different like that. She just got really into her Vedic chart and the cycle of life she's in and aligning with that. And like, she just like ran with all of that. So sometimes women come in and like get really into that and run with it. Sometimes it's like, I want my headaches to stop. Like, I want my hot flashes to stabilize. I want to stop hitting snooze 20 times and just, I want to sleep better at night. And it's like, cool. We can use all these very practical tools to get you there. And then there's also, all of these, nerdy aspects of whether it's the tarot or Jyotish, Vedic astrology, or, but in Ayurveda, again, like the woman with the headaches, it's like, you don't need to know this is caused by blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, let's do some strategies here. Let's figure this out.
I love this. And I have a question here that I actually just caught my eye, and I was like, oh, because we're just running rogue here, which I prefer. I like to have questions prepared just in case, you never know who's going to freeze up and it's just going to be silent. But I have a question, and I don't know if it applies, but tell me what you think. I think it does. And it's a little bit of a shift here. But so women often women hit midlife, I think, with this paradox, right? We've gotten more wisdom. Hopefully, maybe not all. I was just talking to one of my college friends again the other day, and she's like, well, I like to think I'm a little wiser. I'm like, I like to think so too. It's been 30 years. Like, so we're a little wiser, right? Yeah. We've got more wisdom, but culturally, we're seen less.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of times.
Yeah.
How do you help women move from that invisibility? Because it almost becomes part of your own life if you're not seen. I don't know how many other women have walked around their house. If you live with roommates or a family, anybody you're a caretaker for. My son is in my son is in college, and the other day he told me, in the same day he changed his sheets, he folded his laundry. He was running around. I'm so busy. I had to change my sheets. I had to fold my laundry. I had to make dinner. And I was like, oh my God, you're so domestic. It's adorable. Like, I can't even believe you got out of bed and are standing. Like, just the fact that he's functioning on his own. It's like amazing when you hear that somebody that you did all that stuff for is doing it for themselves. And he was like, yeah, and I hate it. I hate doing all of this. And I was like, well, now you can appreciate it more. Because so often I think we are invisible. Like, people joke, what do you think? The little elves come out at night and made this house what it is, or, made your lunches or ironed your pants, whatever it is. When you're caretaking, you often become invisible, and then you become invisible to yourself. And I think that really happens in midlife, because if you have been caring for somebody, it's probably been going on for a while.
Yes.
Or it's when your parents start to become older, you might be caring for them, you might be caring for younger people. So how can you help them reclaim, and do you reclaim that sense of invigoration and wisdom, and that like women at this age are really actually quite powerful, and we can inhibit that. And, so I'm just curious.
Okay. This is an awesome question, because I feel like this ties us right into when you're saying, how can women reclaim that? And I'm like, oh, this is reclaim your magic.
Yeah.
So birthed out of Return to Radiance was more centered around, it was the collective that was centered more around the Ayurvedic health habits, like how to feel better in our bodies and our minds, et cetera. But kind of birthed out of that is Reclaim Your Magic, which is all about embodying the archetypes of the tarot for one's personal transformation. So when you're talking about even the invisibility that happens, which, yeah, right? Does this begins to happen. And, I'm thinking immediately, I started thinking about, there's this one of the archetypes of the tarot called the Empress. And the Empress is the Earth Mother, is this archetype that offers you this very sort of sensual re-embodiment. It is about your creative power, your pleasure, and even sensuality. Now, whether or not, there's many aspects to sensuality. Like, you can sit with your meal at lunchtime, have like the phone away, the TV off, just you and your gorgeous plate of food, and have this. And even like, I love in Ayurveda too, it's a lot of like eating with your hands. It's optional. Not everyone loves to use their hands, but even like that aspect of like, eating with one's hands, it's like it becomes this like even this act of deep radical nourishment. That when we nourish ourselves in this way, there's suddenly this aspect to our embodiment that we become magnetic. Another part with the Empress, because whenever we're learning about one of these archetypes, I always tie it into an actual practice of embodiment, so that it's not an intellectual endeavor of like, I'm trying to remember I'm the Empress.
Right.
No, that's like, there's just, right. It's kind of like, so, part of it could be with like the food you're preparing, but also going back to Abhyanga, right? Having this practice of putting oil on the body. It's a really sensual practice for women. Now, when women first do this practice, because I remember in Return to Radiance, when I first introduced this, I remember one woman in particular who, she's in her early 60s. She's like, I don't touch my body in this way. This feels really weird. This feels really foreign. I don't like what my body has become. And so it becomes this very radical act. And now, meanwhile, fast forward, this woman is also in Reclaim Your Magic. She's like the Abhyanga queen. She loves Abhyanga. And so, just sitting in silence, right? Putting oil on your body, like quite literally loving on your body, becomes this sacred act of worship of yourself. And so the way that begins to then just infuse into, when you're feeling better in your body, you become a more magnetic person in life. You become more visible. Now, you're not necessarily doing it to become more visible, but this is sort of a natural thing that happens. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. Yes. And while you're talking, I'm thinking I have to connect you. I don't know if you've read this book, fiction. It's fiction. Do you read fiction?
I do.
Okay.
I'm always looking for a book.
And I interviewed this woman, so I'm going to link to this podcast as well. It's by Kirsten Miller. It's called The Change.
Oh, okay.
And it's one of my favorite books, and she has since become one of my favorite authors. I've read like a bunch of her books now. But this book in particular is one of my favorite. And I can just tell you at the beginning, without giving anything away, it's about some women who happen to be in midlife. And each of them happens to be going through some type of change, but rather than the change being a negative, she kind of infuses them with, I don't want to say super powers, like they're not superheroes. Nobody's Captain Marvel, they're not like dressing up in a phone booth, but they, and it's very, she does it in a way where it's not over the top, and it's just, well, not mostly not over the top, but it's just interesting because in other cultures, women who approach midlife are more revered, right? Or in history, we have maybe been more revered. So you're bringing that aspect of it out, but you should read that book, The Change, and I'm going to link to it because I feel like what you're saying is tying into it. But can you tell me a little bit more about the practical sides of the things that people are learning, even in the new course? Because you talked about the body stuff. Look at, I'm like rubbing my arm. You talked about the practical strategies for your body, and even how that can kind of transform you. It's almost like you walk into a room like this or you walk into a room like this. It's a very different energy, whether you like the talk of energy or you don't. You can tell if somebody's walking in and they're cowering in a corner versus kind of holding their head up and their shoulders back. They're different people. And it's in the way you can even disguise yourself by doing opposite. That's how powerful that can be. So can you talk to me about the kind of transformations that take place in this new course and how, and the practical aspects of that, or is that less practical?
Just as practical.
Okay.
So, and I love this because I think because the tarot is, I actually think deeply misunderstood maybe not deeply misunderstood, because it's primarily used as a tool of divination in popular culture, which I use it that way. It's wonderful to be used that way. But there's so much, right, in these, again, I call them these primordial archetypes that are, again, this Russian nesting doll metaphor that I love to use. They've always been with you. And so when women first come into Reclaim Your Magic, so we travel, the tarot, I mean, it's a big box. So we're not talking about, it's not 70, there's 78 cards of the tarot. The first 22 are called the major arcana. And these are the sort of the guru cards. Guru is teacher in Sanskrit, but guru means the heavy one, the weighty one, because the guru principle, it's like the way that these archetypes have weight to them. There's something about them that they draw us in. They become this guiding light for life. And so when women first come into Reclaim Your Magic, the very first archetype is called the Fool. Now, of course, it's like, oh, great, I'm coming into this and it's like the Fool. I have a picture I'm going to show you. Maybe this will appear through Zoom. I always have this picture of the Fool, right? If this will show up on the...
Okay.
Here's one depiction of the Fool, right? Now, what is the Fool? The Fool is...
It's adorable.
It's adorable. Yes.
Right?
There's a Japanese artist who created the major arcana out of sand, and this is a print of it. And so this is a print of the Fool, right? Now you see, right, it's sort of like this woman, this young woman, this girl here, right? But she's taking a step off of the cliff.
Okay.
Right? It's this moment of a radical yes to the adventure, even though you don't know what's going to happen. So if you remember when I was talking about meeting my teacher, Paul, and I was like, I had this moment of the Fool of like, oh my God, there's something in my heart that is an undeniable yes. So a lot of times women, just put this down so I'll come back to her. Women come into Reclaim Your Magic and it's like, I'm not entirely sure why I'm here, but I had to say yes, right? And in saying yes, right, in taking that step off of the cliff, right, first of all, it's like the following of the heart. Your heart is going to hold you, right? The heart is this magical carpet. I also love in this particular depiction, now every deck, there's infinite possibilities of what the Fool looks like. But I also love how, right, the ghosts of the past are flying out of her robe, right? And there's all of this great growth. She has like the robe with all of, even in her hand, there's the little sprout through her hand.
Oh, I love that. I love
Am I
that.
remembering right? And even her belt, she's wearing the snake. And the snake, of course, is always, I could talk about this for the end until the end of time. Snake is always, right, the symbol of transformation. So there becomes this radical yes to the journey. And what the fool is, it's not like, it sounds like, wait a minute, you're calling me fool. What's going on here? The fool. It's like, it's this total naivete. Like you've never been here before. So how would you even know? And when the fool energy appears, it's like, okay, I'm going to say yes. It is this, the fool archetype is this freedom, this liberation from self-imposed limitations. And when we find, this WTF moment I've been talking about in midlife, where it's suddenly like, isn't there more here? We also begin to realize like, oh, whether it's culturally or also my own self-imposed limitations, I'm suddenly ready to say yes to something totally different. And the fool energy becomes this reconnection with a real natural spontaneity that may have gotten lost along the way.
And this is how you start.
This is the start, because the fool is card 0 in the tarot. So it begins at 0 and then, goes from there. So we investigate the first 22 archetypes. So card 0 through, or I say card, I even hate saying card because I'm like, it's not a card, right? It's this living, the archetype, it's this living being. So from 0 through 21, there's this journey that we take together. And so it's a really interesting, generally like how our meetings run is, I will lecture a little bit on the archetype because most people have no idea, like, what is this about? Like the magician, what is the magician about? What does it mean for women in midlife, right? And then we'll contemplate, we'll just write for a couple minutes and then we talk. It's like, okay, how is the magician appearing? What would it mean if I were to take complete accountability and responsibility for my own life? What would it be? Magician is this, as above, so below. So in the same way, nature, I love how you're bringing up nature and the earth, right? The same way that nature and the earth is constantly creating more of itself, right? It is this bountiful expression, continually changing, right? Sometimes we see ourselves in midlife as like, all right, well, that was it, wasn't it? Like, okay, now I just am invisible and it's downhill from here. And like, what's going to happen? And all I have are hot flashes. Right. It's sort of like, and the magician is like, no, right? In the same way, as above, so below, right? That same power and potency and possibility is within you. And so the magician is like, right? I'm going to step into life with my practical magic. Right. And so even the embodiment piece for the magician, when we get to the magician, it's an interesting one. It's so practical. It's having an earlier, lighter dinner. It's like, it's almost boring, right? Because a lot of times, like as an Ayurveda, it's so much of it is about digestion, right? And a lot of times, especially culturally in America, we're having these heavier later dinners because life is packed in with a whole bunch of stuff. Like the kid goes to soccer, it doesn't end until 8. Oh my God, it's 8:30. It's 8:45 at night and we're sitting down with a lasagna. And then we wonder why we can't sleep at night. So by learning this very simple grandmother habit of earlier, somewhat lighter dinner, you digest, you have spaciousness at night. You set yourself up for a good night's sleep. One, because you're not digesting, you're not cleaning up the dishes at 9:30 p.m. at night. It's like everything in your wind down becomes so different. And so it's this very practical aspect of the magician saying, I am taking accountability and responsibility for my own life, irregardless of, yes, there are all of these moving pieces in life and there's always someone who has to eat later and this, but it's like, I can sit, I can nourish myself in the early evening. And oh my goodness, that just switched so much around in my life.
I love how practical but also I love how you just said that it's almost boring. And I feel like a lot of people, and okay, I don't want to just say bad actors, but a lot of people who don't really know anything about tarot or horoscopes or astrology or yoga, or they go into it like sometimes people go into it for the woo woo, right? You're like, oh, like I'm going to get something out of this and it's going to be like, and I'm going to get this. And instead you're actually like, well, no, here's what we're going to do. That's like so grounded and it's going to make this difference. And I just think it's so interesting, but also how do you prevent, like, you know, I'm sure you're aware that like tarot card reading has become a little bit of a party trick, right? You know, you go to a party, somebody's got temporary tattoos, somebody's got a tarot card reader, like, and so there's that aspect, and that can be fun, maybe enlightening. I don't know how that ties in necessarily to, basically, how do you prevent yourself from kind of going down that path without the fuller expression of what you're teaching? Because I think because we're all looking for quick fixes. I've had actually the app on my phone where it's like pick 3. Yes. I mean, it literally could not be less emotionally connected. It's literally like, I'm like, and you can't even barely pick. You're like on the thing. I'm like, I don't know, whichever one's flip. So
it's like, I mean, I love this question, Danielle. I love all of your questions because this gets into, right, even you may have noticed in Mystical Moon Days a couple weeks ago, I wrote about what I love about magic and then, right, the trap of magical thinking. So that sort of trap of magical thinking is, let me get a reading. Let me just hope everything's going to get better. Let me hope my chronic inflammation goes away. When I'm still having nothing against lasagna, I'm just, right? My lasagna at 8:45 p.m. Nothing against lasagna, but yeah, that's going to create some difficulties in your body and in your mind, and it's going to disrupt your sleep, and you're going to feel bad. You're not going to have a good poop in the morning, right? All these things. My kids are, if they would be like, oh, you didn't talk about a good poop in the morning. Everyone needs this. So anyway, digestion, it's a big thing in Ayurveda, but that's where, right, sort of like the marriage for me of the mystical and the practical, because it is about taking accountability and taking responsibility for your life and saying, okay, yeah, like it's not just about, let me just hope I get the good card today and let me push that on the app. I mean, yes, it's fun. It's wonderful. Yes, there's the tarot reader at the party and readings are delightful. And yet what I'm really interested in is this deep, sustained transformation that is the power and potency in utilizing these archetypes in a much different way than popular culture does.
I love that. And when you talk about utilizing them, by the way, you're talking about going through all those first 22, 21, 22. And because of course now I'm like, sun sign, moon sign, where am I? What archetype? You know, I'm very don't know anything. I'm very naive and uninformed and total.
I love.
Okay.
I love this. There's no prerequisite.
Okay. So, but when you're talking about these are things anybody can do all of the time. These aren't like, well, if you're a Leo and you're in the X house.
Yeah.
No, this is all the time.
And I love to see them as they have always been with you. That this is not anything new, that in fact, at midlife, or I like to say sort of the second half of life, because I work with a lot of women in their 60s and 70s and beyond. In the second half of life, it's like, I am remembering this wisdom that already exists in my bones that has just gotten forgotten along the way. And so even, a very, for your listeners, on my website, which is tigerpriestess.com, when you go on, there's a, hello, you can, if you would like this PDF to guide you through, to learn about what your guiding archetype is for this particular year of your life. Now, you don't need to be a woman in midlife to get the PDF and do the numerology and figure out, I'm in, let's say, my Tower year. What is the Tower year? oh, right, the Tower years where, the calcified, old, kind of hardened parts of my old identity are ready to fall away, right? Sort of like I mean, we're in a very
But everybody's in a different year?
everyone's in a different year.
Okay.
So this is something, it's a little kind of like a branch off of, we're going to get there and reclaim your magic. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but everyone has what's kind of called their growth year. So based on their specific like month of their birthday, day of their birthday, the year they were born, I give you a very simple formula. You can grab the PDF off of my website and figure out like, oh, which of these 22 archetypes am I in now? And it's always very interesting. You can also go back and look at, 5 years ago when I was going through like really radical changes, like let me do the numerology, figure out what growth year was I in then? And it can be mind blowing where it's like, oh, wow, I was really in this growth year of movement, change, transformation. Makes so much sense. I was in my chariot year during the time when, we moved and this happened and da da da.
Oh my gosh, I love this. And now obviously that's what I'm going to next. And I want to know,
Totally.
obviously I'm going to do that and I want to do it right now. But so I'm going to, and let me ask you a question, one more. I will not keep you all day, even though I want to.
I'm loving it.
You said you haven't gotten to that yet in your group now.
Yes.
How long does it go and when can people sign up for the next one?
So the current Reclaim Your Magic, we began in June. We end the first week of December. Shockingly, I'm like, we are almost there. We're almost through. So we've been traveling through. Yesterday, we talked about the moon and the sun archetype, which is number 18 and number 19.
Oh,
so
wow.
Just a few more. And then in November and early December is when we're kind of, one of the things that we're doing, because we're learning about these archetypes. Again, we're embodying that it's not just this intellectual endeavor, but each woman is creating her own tarot map, I call it, right? And so the map, meaning, aliveness, and purpose. So in the summertime, we created our first map that's like, okay, what, rather than saying, right, because this is so often how the tarot is, of like, okay, right, shuffle, 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 like, who did I get? Oh, the Hermit. Okay, right? So it's like, rather than shuffle, 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 who did I get? We're turning the cards this way. So it's like, I am choosing, now this happens to not be a major arcana, so let me not use this, but I am choosing, right, to embody the Hermit to get better sleep at night, because the Hermit is all about, well, the embodiment practice, winding down, caretaking the senses, like being in this sort of, like what it sounds like this, I almost want to take my scarf and this hermit mode of like being quiet, introspective, turning inside, which we need for a good night's sleep. We can't be on our phones until like 10 o'clock and put it down, time for bed. The body's like, what are you talking about? Right. So in this tarot map, each woman is pulling, because it's a collective journey, but it's also a deeply individual journey. So each woman, so in the summertime, it's like, all right, let's create our first tarot map. What archetype represents meaning to you? What one are you activating in your life to bring in a deeper meaning? Which archetype are you activating for aliveness, right? That visibility, that juiciness of life that sometimes gets lost in midlife. It's like, ooh, that aliveness. And then what about in my purpose? And a lot of times, I think purpose gets tricky because it sounds like something big and outside of yourself. But I love to see purpose, or dharma in Sanskrit. Dharma, the root of the word, the DHR, it means that which supports. So our dharma, our purpose, it's like being very purposeful, like in my own life, rather than, again, I just keep using this example of checking out on the phone, because oftentimes we're frustrated, we're bored, there's more, or we're just overwhelmed. And it's like, what do? We create more overwhelm and are like, let me just scroll because I don't even know what to do with myself. And so instead, it's
such an easy out,
It's an easy out, right? So instead, in purpose, someone might choose the Emperor archetype, which is all about creating stability and boundaries. saying no, right, to what is not serving, so that you're saying yes to, right, the kingdom of yourself, right? So the women created this initial map in the summer where they chose the archetypes, and then that map has been evolving. So then about a month ago, a couple weeks ago, we expanded the map. Okay, let's now map expansion. Let's add 2 more archetypes. So they're constantly working with these particular archetypes. And because it's a map, it's like when Google Maps gets updated on your phone, you're like, oh, now I have this whole new update where it's telling me like the cop is over there. So let me slow down, right? It's like, oh, the map is growing and evolving. So a woman's map that she creates at this time, right? Even perhaps this season, even from the summer into the autumn, the map sometimes changes. Oh, I really had the lovers for my meaning. That's another archetype. I had the lovers, but now I'm shifting it out. And I want to bring in the high priestess, right? So it's like, it's this growing, living document that becomes this really kind of anchoring light for midlife. It's like, I'm following this map and I'm creating these changes. So every woman's map looks very, very different. So we're almost through the investigation of the major arcana, and then we'll do deeper work with the map, our growth card, which again, your listeners can grab that PDF on tigerpriestess.com and nerd out on what is their growth year? Who is their guiding archetype?
Wait, and so when this ends, will it start back up again?
Thank you. You had asked me that. It will.
Okay.
Little TBD, sort of like time-wise. I'm like, originally I was thinking
I gotcha.
February, and I'm like, I'm still mapping out in Q4, what is my 2026 going to look like?
Okay.
But yes, that will be announced through my newsletter when enrollment opens again. So, and then if people want to, receive Mystical Moon Days, it's kind of my Monday love letter that goes out.
It's a great newsletter.
Thank you.
It's a really good one.
I always try to make it something that is valuable, right? Last week I wrote, about Abhyanga, about giving my grandmother Abhyanga before I knew what Ayurveda was.
Yes.
Right? It's kind of like this whole interesting thing. So just like something tangible that someone can leave with, can practice, or giving inspiration or a different perspective on the woo-woo, because I love to make it practical.
Now, I was just going to say, and those are the newsletters are always very practical. So I'm going to link to your newsletter. I'm going to link to your website in the show notes, stuff like that. Is there any other way people can work with you, or that you prefer?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, usually a lot of kind of the entryway. It's like a lot of times so getting a reading is often what people, I offer a couple different kinds of readings. So I sit with people in one-on-one 1-hour readings over Zoom, where we sit, they can ask questions. I always like, if someone has an accurate birth time, I always love to cast their Vedic chart, because it is astounding the things that will come out from, I know we didn't talk too much about Jyotish. Maybe next time we'll talk about that, but it's like a whole other, like, blows my mind all the time. So readings are wonderful. And then I also offer seasonal mini readings, and these are offered only at the change of the season. So I just did the autumn equinox one. So the next one's winter solstice will be offered. I release those through my newsletter. They usually get gobbled up within 24 hours because people love them, and they're recordings. So I sit and I do a tarot reading for each person. Usually the readings are like 20 minutes. I deliver them through email. People just like put in their headphones, and I give them their tarot spread, and, just tell a story of what is, up for them in the season ahead. Yeah, people love the mini readings. Those are very beloved. Yes.
I love, and plus it's good for you too, because it's like, it gives you like that space, you don't have to commit to a full hour with everybody and conversation. Yeah. It's like, here you go.
Yes. Although I'm like terrible at, like, I always give too much. Like I was something, I'm working on my own emperor boundaries. I'm always like, oh, I know our hour's up, but it's so irresistible.
Like, there's just so much.
There's so much that I'm like, my challenge is like, hold it back, Sharon. Like, there's always another reading. So but readings are fun. It's a wonderful way to learn more about yourself, your own tendencies, your hidden gifts and talents, where the challenges in life lie, like where to, grow and evolve yourself. But intuitive readings are are wonderful. Yeah, I really
Oh,
enjoy
they
them.
sound awesome. Sharon, I cannot thank you enough. This has been so great. Did you think when you met me in Ocean City, this is going to I was like, I swear I dialed in on you in 2 seconds. I was like, we're going to be friends.
I love it. Thank you so much, Danielle. You are just such a delight to sit with and so easy to talk to. So I thank you so much.
I appreciate it. This was really great fun. And I hope everybody listening clicks on the link you're going to find in the show notes, it does a little exploring, finds out more about their year and their numerology and all the fun stuff that Sharon talked about, which really is fun. So anyway, thank you so much. I will let you go. Have a great day. And that's it for today's episode of Roar. A huge thank you to Sharon Kenney Rudy for joining us and for reminding us that even the most mystical paths are grounded in real human experience. Next week, I'll be joined by sex therapist Alex Caroline Robbie for a conversation about intimacy, communication, and what it really takes to stay connected in relationships that matter. Thanks so much for listening. Before you go, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. I'll see you next week.